Okay, we are live. I don't notice anything. We're good. We're good? Okay. My name is Tom Land. I am the principal and owner of Highscape Commercial Real Estate. We help businesses find a home, and I'm going to teach you, hopefully in less than an hour, everything that you need to know to find and negotiate a spot for your home, whether that's a lease or purchase or whatnot. Most of the time it's a lease, but all of the time this service is called occupier services. So 6 parts. I can answer questions at the end, and we'll just jump right into it. So first off, killing it. Why am I teaching you occupier services? Okay, so you may or may not be an aspiring broker, right? Maybe you think that you want to do this. Maybe you're in high school, maybe you're in college, maybe you're after college and you're just curious about the industry and you want to find out everything you want to find out about it, and if this is something that you want to do. You might also be junior. I'm a little dyslexic, so if I do anything backwards, just bear with me. Junior commercial real estate broker. Maybe you want to get better at what you're doing. Maybe you don't have the best training or resources, or maybe you do, you just want something to supplement it, see how other people do it, what their processes are. So maybe you're in the business, but you want to learn it. And then the last thing is maybe you are a business owner or operator, admin, whatever, and you're trying to find a space, an office for your own home. It could be a warehouse, could be an office, could be a retail spot. Today we're talking about office, so that could be you. So you might be, an owner. Okay, what do I do? Like I said, this is my little tagline. I started saying this in a networking group and it just stuck. I help businesses find a home. This actually came from, I would always go after this residential real estate guy when we were giving our introductions, and he'd always be like, I help families find a home. And so I'd stand up and I'd say, just like Brandon helps families find a home, I help businesses find a home. And then I just kept on shortening it till it became the tagline that it is. So that's exactly what it is. You don't have a space. Maybe you do have a space. Maybe you have a space and you want 2 spaces. Maybe you have 200 spaces and you want to grow to 250 throughout the nation, throughout the world. You help them find the home and you help negotiate the contract. So what that looks like, what we're going to talk about a lot today, is site selection. Gosh, man, this is hard. I'm going to get better at it. This is my first one. Site selection. The other thing that it could be is contract negotiations, whether that's purchase, a PSA, an LOI for a purchase, or whether it's like a proposal to have a lease, or maybe it's the lease contract itself. And then the last thing I do is vendor resources. So if you have a space that you need to build out, I'm just going to do vend. If you have a space that you need to build out, maybe you have a general contractor you need to negotiate with, maybe you want to negotiate with a couple, maybe you need furniture. I help with all those processes. I don't get paid for that. That's just part of what I do, and that's just the full gambit of it. So that is the 3 things that you do in occupier services. Parties involved in commercial real estate. Okay, what we're going to focus on today is the lease side of things. And we can talk about the purchase side. It's far simpler, but it's a lot more expensive, and a building that has 50 tenants in it sells one time, but they have 50 contracts for the leases that happen and roll all the time. So the point is that, a lot more leases. That's what we're going to talk about because it matters to the most amount of people. So the parties involved, you got your landlord, obviously, the person who owns the building. Almost always it's this big financial institution. In smaller cases, it'll be a one-off person. You have the landlord rep. Maybe this is called agency, leasing agency, or landlord agency. That's the representative that is focused on taking care of the landlord. You have the tenant rep, or what we're talking about, helping businesses find home, the occupier services side of things, and then you have the tenant, right? And so I don't think I have to break this down, but I'm going to because it might be helpful for a lot of people. So you have a building, right? And in the building, you have the landlord that owns the building, right? When you're thinking of a landlord, don't bother thinking it as a human being. There's an entire organization of people that work together to manage this building. You're not going to be dealing with one person. You never will be. It's all just pencils and paper and numbers and spreadsheets. Okay, so these guys really have a tight bond. They love their landlord rep, right? And this landlord rep right here, he's got the keys. He shows everybody the spaces. He takes calls. He does all that stuff. Then most of the conversations happen between the landlord rep and the tenant rep. And the tenant rep is the guy who is out there putting together contracts, comparing different buildings, making sure that you're getting the best deal. And then these guys are very good friends with the tenant, right? And the tenant, most likely you, is a group of people who just want to find a home for their business. They don't want to be taken advantage of. Okay, so this is the exact process, right? Sometimes going direct means that you get rid of this person, which means this guy gets double the fee. It's not bad. Sometimes landlord wants to get rid of this person because they want to do everything in-house. That's fine too. But always, you're going to have that effective process, right? So, why do landlords hire representation? Well, most of the time, a building like this is bought in a fund, and they have investors. Investors pool their money, they buy into the fund, or they pool their money and they buy the building, and they want to get an ROI, right? They want to get a return on their investment. So, the landlord rep has a fiduciary financial obligation to the landlord. Their entire job is to get that ROI to be the highest number possible, to the detriment of the tenant, which is fine, but it's business, right? So why do tenants use the occupier services, right? They don't want to be taken advantage of. We're going to do a don't symbol, don't advantage of. I don't know if that makes sense. We're just going to go with it. They want to make sure they see all the options, right? Because you don't want to pick a space because you think it's the best space, and it turns out there's 50 other spaces that were going to be way better. And then they want to make sure that they don't agree to terms that are damaging to their business, right? So this is stuff like the question of, is it normal for a landlord to charge me every 2 weeks, which would be effectively 13 months worth of rent, or once every month, which is 12 months of rent? That's very important to know, right? It's not typical. If that's the case, make sure you call me. Why businesses hire corporate occupier services? So look, this is the key word here, corporate, right? If you have one location, or you're finding your first location, or you're relocating, or you're renegotiating your lease contract, right? That's one-off. That's one time. You have a tenant rep, local, he's your buddy, he helps you out, right? This corporate OS means something different. That means that somebody's got, 200 locations plus, and they want to make sure that all 200 are taken care of. They're not trying to pinch every penny on every location. They're just trying to make sure it all gets taken care of, and they're never put in a bad situation. So sometimes it's national, sometimes it's regional, sometimes it's global. This is what I do specifically. So I worked in 30 states last year. I'm working 27 states year to date, negotiating. Worked in Australia, in Brisbane, worked in Canada, reviewed a contract in Ireland, right? So the point is that it's across the board, and there's a bunch of locations, and they're wanting to make sure that they're taken care of on all of them. Okay, so that's the intro to the class, so to speak. Feels like I'm in college and I'm the professor. I hated those guys. Part 2, the start. It's needs analysis. Okay, so before you do anything, you have to start with a needs analysis. So what is a needs analysis? A needs analysis is identifying what the specs are that you have to have for your business, because it's not like a home. Like in a home, you have 3-bed, 2-bath. Great, right? What else is there? There's some stuff like the pool and stuff like that. But in a business, you might have a layout where it's just straight trading floors and there's no offices, and you've got a big conference room or a training room and you have a break room. There's other ones that are law firms and it's all offices. And they've got maybe, I don't know, like a couple of admins that are here and there, but for the most part, it's very office-centered. Those are completely separate spaces. So you have to identify what your needs are and the specs that you have. And not just the specs of the overall, but the needs like within the space, the amenities, stuff like that. Gosh, man, I'm bad at this. I'm going to get better, I promise. Okay, so when you're putting together needs analysis, what's the info you need? Well, you probably need the location, the geography. You got to know what market you want to look at, the bounds, this side of the highway, access to this road, stuff like that. Maybe you have a rail line you want to be by. The type of building, I'm just going to do building, BLDG, whether you want office, whether you want retail, whether you want an office space and a retail site, like stuff like that. You have building features. Okay, so you have features that the building has. These things like your conference rooms, the building has. Maybe there's a gym in the building. Maybe there's a golf simulator in the building, right? And then you have your space features, which is different. So maybe a space feature, maybe you don't care about a break room, or maybe you do. Maybe you want a copy corner, or maybe you want an actual room dedicated solely to copying machines and, marketing materials, stuff like that. There's fixed specs, stuff that you can't change, right? An example of this, an example that wouldn't be the case would be like that copier room. Like you can make a copier room, right? A fixed space spec would be like ceiling height. Maybe you have a preference on ceiling height and it has to be taller than 10 feet. You can't change that. You can't come into the space and change the ceiling height, right? So you have fixed specs that are there. Give it a tail. And then you have variable specs. And I just said the variable specs are, things that you can change. So why are these two things separate? Sometimes you don't want to deal with changing things. Sometimes you prefer to find a space that already has a copier room. Maybe you say, hey, these are the things that I want in the space, but if they don't have it, they can be variable. I don't have to have it. I'm okay with not having it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so all of these things are really important to identify before you get into the process. I can't tell you how many times I've started a process because I didn't do this, and then a month down the line, we're touring spaces, and my client's looking at me going, well, where's the conference room? Or where's the break room? It's like, you didn't even tell me you wanted one, right? So it's very important to do this. And it's not, if you're a broker, it's not on your client to think of this stuff. It's on you to ask those questions and find out, right? In the example that I just gave, where I go a month down the road and I'm touring and we didn't know something, that was on me. That wasn't on the client. Okay, anyway. Part 3, site selection. So, 80% of finding the perfect space is blank, the perfect space. I'm going to fill this in for you. It is finding the perfect space. Okay, 80%. This is a motto that I live by. I tell all the younger guys this. I explain it to them. 80% of finding the perfect space is finding the perfect space. You're not trying to make something out of nothing. Sometimes you have to do that, right? That happens. And if the market is tight and there's not a lot of space available, maybe you get a space that's a shell and you make it into something. Most of the time, though, you want to be in such a position that you're leveraging 3 or 4 options, and all 3 or 4 of those make sense for the business. And it's not some huge haul, some huge effort, Herculean effort to rebuild it and make it perfect. No, it's already ready to go. And you're not going to get a space that's $50 a square foot in a class AAA office building and get it down to $25 a foot. That doesn't happen. There's not like that's miracle working, right? In COVID, we saw some great, drops in rates and stuff. But the point is that you have to have lender approval for stuff like that. Lenders are going to shoot it down. You're going to get a couple of bucks off the rate. So you want to make sure you're finding something that's actually in your budget, that actually fits your needs analysis, right? Okay, so find the right space. The tools you need, if you're a broker, if you're a business owner, whatever you're looking at, you're going to want CoStar. It's the biggest one. It's just a conglomerate of data, commercial data, a lot of people use. It's mostly correct. It's not always going to be up to date. So like maybe a rate is actually $35 a foot and it's listed at 33, but that's a lot closer than some of the other listing sites that give you a range of 12 to $50 a foot. And you're like, what is this, right? So big database. If you want to use something different, it's your prerogative. CoStar is a big one. You want to have your email account. Email. You want to have Office. What I mean by that is like Microsoft Word. You can use Google Docs, but everybody uses Microsoft Word, so it's just a lot more compatible to Redline documents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the last bit that you're probably going to need is a phone, candidly. You have to talk to a lot of people. And then I guess a laptop or something like that. So you want to make sure you have the right tools so you're not just going into this thinking that it's all easy. CoStar, to my understanding, is $500 a month. Email, Office, phone, all that stuff. You can do the math on it. Okay, so you have your parameters. So when you're doing your searching, what you're going to do, you're going to go on CoStar and you're going to filter through stuff, right? You're going to make sure that you get the right space. LoopNet is CoStar's red-haired second cousin. LoopNet is horrible about this. There's so much bad information. It's aggravating to have to try to sift through it. Just skip the CoStar. Just buy the CoStar subscription, pay the money, look for it. So if you have CoStar, you're looking it up, you're looking through your parameters. You're going to have to first identify your property parameters and then your premise parameters. So with the property parameters, this is obviously stuff that has to do with the building. So if we're talking about an office building, maybe we already identified that we want it to be a taller building, so above 4 stories or something. We want to just identify whether it's for lease or for sale. So let's say it's for lease. The building type, we already said office. What else? The square foot range is huge. So this is kind of a tricky one because clients won't really know exactly what range they're looking for. So you'll have to sometimes back into it and calculate based on what their needs analysis is. Conference room is, 300 square feet. An office is 150 square feet. You kind of work through those numbers and then you put it together. Or if they actually have a square footage right now and they're saying, hey, we've got 8 employees, we're running grow by 2 employees, right? Maybe what you do is you say, okay, you got 2,000 square feet. Let's just look at 2,500 square feet so you can accommodate that growth. But you don't want to be too picky on this. You don't want to just say 2,500 square feet. What you have to do is you have to do a range. So if you do your range, you say 2,000 square feet up to 3,000 square feet. And you want to go one deviation off of that. So probably not lower than 2,000 because they're already at that, but 2,000 square feet to 3,100 square feet. The reason for that is what if there's a space that's 3,001 square feet? And this has happened to me before. I looked up, did a survey, found all these spaces, and then I had my cap at 5,000 square feet. This is a deal I did in Phoenix, Arizona. Or was it Reno? It was Reno. Anyway, point is that we're doing this deal here, and my client looks up their parameters, and their parameters were just blanket. They were just sifting through everything, and there's literally a space for 5,001 square feet. Drove me nuts because it made me look like I wasn't finding the right property. So just go a little bit beyond it. Make sure you capture everything. And then while you're doing 2,000 square feet, why not just start at 2,500 square feet? Well, one, you don't want to put your clients in a space that's too big for them if you can help it. You want to make sure that they're paying only for what they need and you're not, upselling them some crazy thing. And if you find a space that's incredibly efficient, maybe their space isn't. If you find a space that's incredibly efficient and you have a ton of workstation areas and you have double offices instead of single offices, then all of a sudden that 2,000 square feet can hold 12 people instead of 8 people that their current 2,000 square foot space is. So the configuration matters too. So you have your square footage range, which is good. And then you have a couple of other things. The premises things, those are things that we're hired as a commercial real estate broker to sift through and use our best judgment on. So you reach out to a space, you ask them for a floor plan, you find out what the layout is, and then you identify based on the needs analysis, the space section of the needs analysis, if that layout fits or not. Sometimes you can't be picky. Maybe there's only 5 options in the market, you have to show all 5. But if there's 50 options in the market, now we're checking all the boxes. Now we're trying to find the space that fits the most perfect. And it goes back to that other page I had before, which is, okay. No, it's right here. 80% of finding the perfect space is finding the perfect space. Okay, so I'm going to stop beating that into the ground. Once you do this, once you're able to identify everything on your tools and you're putting it together, you got the Microsoft Office Suite, so you can use PowerPoint or whatever you use. Maybe you have a SaaS. We have a SaaS that builds the whole thing for us so it looks pretty and all that. You put together a matrix of options. And what a matrix of options is, let me get to it. Hold on. A 2-page document. So it could be a little longer than 2 pages, but really it should be, maybe just a couple of pages, and the meat of it, the stuff that actually matters, is just 2 pages. And you're going to have a map, show the geography so that people can identify whether they want to actually look at it or not. This all should remain virtual. You shouldn't have to print this out and assemble it. But you have a map, you have Google links, people can click on it, go to the street view, look at it, say, okay, this is great, or maybe this is not great, this is by a bad part of town, right? And then the other part that you have is the actual matrix itself. So a matrix, by definition, is like a table of numbers. In this case, it's not a table of numbers, it's a table of specs. So this is what a matrix looks like. I'm going to put it up to the camera for just a second. This is for a client that I had. So you're not going to really understand what you just saw, but basically there's a whole bunch of different rows and different specs. In this case, you have a column, and it cuts down here, and you have your building, and then you have your target suite, which is like, suite 100 or whatever, and then you have the rate, and then you have the OPEX, and then you have the monthly, so that you can see everything. So that there's a confusing part right here that people don't know about. If something is full service versus triple net, those are completely different rates. Both of them are $20 a foot. One is triple net, one is full service. One actually means $20. The other one means $32, right? Because the operating expenses is separate. So when you add those two together, those two numbers together, you get a new number, and then that becomes what your actual monthly is instead of having some hidden costs or something, right? It's very important. And then we use a stoplight method. So stoplight means green, yellow, red, exactly what you probably think it means. And for the needs analysis, the most important parts, the parts that you put an asterisk by and you say, hey, I have to have 5 offices, you put over here in the stoplight method. You say this one has 5 offices, where this doesn't, right? This one is by a rail line or by a train station, right? This one isn't. And then you do a stoplight. Maybe this one's by a train station, but it's 5 minutes walking distance. It's not like right outside the building. So instead of making it green, you make it yellow. This is a really easy way to show your clients everything that they need to know. And then at the end of this stoplight method, which you'll have a whole bunch of little check boxes and stuff that you highlight or whatnot, at the very end, you do a link to the flyer. Not every space has a flyer. In the office world, they're usually pretty good about this stuff. But you have a link to a flyer. And that flyer will take the client to, where they should actually be going. Okay, so where they should be actually going to look at more materials for the property so that, they can look more into it. What's the point of the matrix? Well, here's the thing. A matrix is a simple document. right? Like I said, there's a map page and then there's the matrix page. That's only 2 pages. Sometimes there's more pages because there's 50 options in the market. The goal of the matrix is to show everything under the sun that might work. And it's not your job to tell them what will work or what won't work. If your client tells you, hey, I don't want to see everything in the market, you pick for me, right? They're trusting you to do it. That's great. That's different. But most of the time, your client wants to see everything in the market, and you can't withhold information. So the goal is to show everything, and then you cut what you don't like. The goal is not to pick. That's where people kind of mess up with this part. And it's nuanced, but it's actually very important. If you can look at the matrix and you say, all right, great, this one I'm going to put a hard line through because I don't like, right? This building at 123 West, whatever, suite, whatever, I don't like it. That's perfect. That's the goal of the matrix, because you're going to have 20 or 30 options and you're going to want to cut as many as possible. You haven't reached out. If you're a broker, or if your broker sends you a matrix, right, which they should, they haven't reached out to the landlords yet, right? So they're giving you estimated information based on marketed materials that may or may not be 100% correct. Your job is to look at this and just immediately tell them, dude, don't waste your time reaching out to all 50 of these properties, all 30 of these properties. Just reach out to these guys. Because I know for a fact I'm not going to look at 123 West Street. That building is way outside of my geographic area that I want to look at. That building is next to a homeless shelter that I don't want my employees to have to deal with. Whatever the case is, right? Whatever their reasoning is that they struck it, you're not going to reach out to that because it's a waste of your time and it's a waste of their time, right? Okay, so you show them everything, you cut the options. If you're the business, right, and you cut the options, your goal is to cut it down to 10. That is the sweet spot. If you get it to 10, you're in a good spot. If you get it to 15, that's okay too. That's fine. There's 2 things that happen here that I see people mess up all the time. Some people will not cut enough, and they'll be like, I just reach out to all of them. That's terrible. You want to be decisive as a business owner. You want to know what you want. You don't want to be stringing everybody along, right? Pretty soon you're going to end up having to tour 3 different days with 30 different buildings because you weren't decisive enough. So don't do that, right? Just get it down to at least 15. Okay. Now let's say you get it down to 15. The other issue that I see, this is the second one, is they'll look at the matrix and they'll say, I want to tour these 3 buildings. Hold on. Don't just say you want to tour these 3 buildings and cut everything else. Like, give a couple of options. Even if those are your favorite, even if you put a little star next to those because you're like, these are my favorite, let the broker reach out to them. Let the broker make sure that they actually work and they actually make sense for you. Because if the broker reaches out and the leasing agent was just putting it up there to get more leads and it's actually not available, then you picked 3 and now only one of those actually work. Now you're stuck with just one option. You want to have options. You want to be able to leverage options. Okay, so give yourself some options. Don't just cut it down too far. Cut the deal breakers. Identify the deal breakers, right? Resist the urge to string along, more properties than is necessary, and try to consolidate it down to the top 10. If you do that, you're going to be in a good position. Okay, so let's say that you do that. Let's say you cut it down to that perfect top 10 number. And now your broker reaches out to those 10. Maybe one of those doesn't actually work because it was a fake listing or something like that, right? Now you're at your survey of options. A survey of options, I'll give you a little preview. Survey of options shows you everything that you need to know about this property. So this is an example. So you have information, you have pictures, this is building information. Then you have space information. This says no floor plan because I didn't have one, but it's space floor plan. You have comments on it. You've got your alignment, your needs analysis, or your stoplight method over on this side. You've got your breakdown of the economics so that nothing's hidden. In this case, the triple nets are $14 a foot. If we didn't ask about it, we wouldn't have known it. And so the point is that you have 9, 10, 15 properties that the broker now reaches out to, that we reach out to, that you reach out to as the business owner to find out what the information is. And now you're consolidating it. Now you're turning it around and showing your CEO or your client, whomever, right? So what is the point of it? It is a comprehensive data set that if all things fail, if everything else fails, you can still make a decision based off this data set. If you couldn't make the tour and you had to send somebody else, you've got this comprehensive data set that you can look back on and say, all right, I wasn't on the tour, but I have opinions on the properties that we want to send contracts out to and we want to negotiate with. Okay, so it's a comprehensive data set. Like I said, every single one should have the matrix. It should have the map as well, the first couple of pages. Before, the matrix is just those two things, right? The survey should have those, and it should have a lot more. But it should be consolidated. It shouldn't have all 50. It should just have the top 10 that you want to see. So now, beyond that, you have a building page, where you have all the information about the building, and then you have a space page where you have all the information about the space. If there's multiple spaces in a building, like this office building, there's 2, 3 spaces available that fit your needs. You show all the spaces, but you just have one building page. Okay, so how do you review the survey? This is different than the matrix, right? In the matrix, we're looking at cutting stuff. We're just trying to get rid of stuff. We're just trying to get rid of all the stuff that we know doesn't make sense. And we get more stringent based on how many options we have. The survey, however, the goal of the survey is to pick. It is to pick. You're not looking at trying to cut stuff anymore. You can do selection by elimination, but your goal is to pick your top options. Because out of that 10 to 15 spaces that you've inquired on, that your broker's inquired on, that they've shown to you, you want to make sure that you got the best ones that you're touring. So now you're looking at the ones that you actually think are worth touring. If you're shown a space up here that you go, that floor plan doesn't work for us, there's no way we could turn this into a home of our own, right? Don't pick it. Don't string it along. Don't waste your time driving 40 minutes, seeing the space, coming back, if you're not going to pick it anyway. So just pick your top 3 to 6. Sweet spot is 5, really, but 3 to 6. If you do more than 6, either you're going to have to split the tour into 2 days, or it's going to start blending together, and you're not going to really remember which ones are you really wanted to see or which ones you really remembered or you really liked. And not only that, you're really just stringing things along. Like, you know for a fact those 6 are great, and the 7th one you weren't ever going to tour anyway. So don't string things along. Just be decisive. 3 to 6, that's what you want to do. Okay, so you pick your top 3 to 6. You review the layouts. You review the building amenities. They've got the training room that you always wanted. They're next to a hotel for your board to come in and view. You've seen the walkability, right? They can go over and they can get to the shops nearby and get a bite to eat for your employees or whatever. They have a cafe in the building if they don't want to go anywhere, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now you've actually selected what you want to tour. Okay, so part 4 is the tours. Okay, so now this is the most fun part of all the parts. And really, we're probably going to wrap this up here, but I'll just go until I can go. So tours are the most fun part. Okay, so sight unseen equals what? Equals bad. We do not want to lease a building or lease a space that we've never seen before. You have to have at least one of your employees go out and look at it. Don't have your broker go out and look for it. They're not going to know what you want. Have one of your employees that are in the business, even with the needs analysis, they're not going to know. Have one of your employees actually go walk the space, and say whether they want it. Sight unseen is bad. So how do you set it up? The best way to do it, most efficient way to do it, anyone can do it no matter what, but the most efficient way to do it is you set a calendar block, you send it to your client. Your calendar block has all the spaces that you intend to have not listed in there. You just have the calendar block. Once you have the calendar block, now it's on your clients. They're not booking anything during that time. Then you call up all the agents. So you picked 6 buildings that you wanted to tour. You call up all the agents. You send them emails. You try to set up the tours. Before you do that, you just reach out to them, make sure that you can tour. You go on Google Maps and you find the distance between each one. Don't make your client go here, then 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 here. Don't do that, right? What it should look like is you go here, then 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 here, and then we're done, right? That's what it should look like. And then for all these little sections, you're identifying what the drive time is. Maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 15 minutes, maybe it's 30 minutes between each site. Hopefully not, but maybe that's the case, right? And if that's the case, you have to account for that in your tour. Also, make sure you're aware of time zones. Time zones are super annoying to have to deal with if you've never dealt with them before. So get used to time zones. Make sure that you're doing it. I just set up a tour in Columbus, Ohio. Very important. I just set up a tour in Dallas, Texas. Those 2 time zones are completely different, so make sure you account for that. Set it up. Make it an easy route. Make sure you budget the time in between. Email the brokers. Tell them, hey, this is exactly how you set up a tour, right? You say, hey, I've got a client. I've shown them your space. They liked it and they want to tour. Are you or one of your teammates available to show them the space, or can you have the space unlocked? Okay. Why do you say it like that? Well, leasing agents are hired to actually market the space and show the space. They're not hired to just sit on their butts and get on their computer and send emails. So if they don't go to the space, they look bad, right? So they have to go. What if they have a conflict? What if they had a lunch that day, right? Now they're having to problem solve and you gave them options. So either they go and they cancel their lunch, they send an associate who has to then cancel their lunch or whatever, right? Or they have the space unlocked, but you don't budge. You do your absolute best not to mess up the feng shui of the tour. You don't want that feng shui you don't want to turn it into this just because some leasing agent can't accommodate. Listen, they want your client because your client's going to give them money for the next 5 years, right? Don't let them mess it up because they have a lunch plan. Okay, so set up the tour. If they're like, oh, I have a lunch, I can't do it, just say, hey, can you have the space unlocked? We have your tour sandwiched between 2 others, and we can't move it around, right? This is the only day that my client can work. Be aggressive with that. Don't let them push you over or whatever. Okay, so how do you prep for the tour? That survey that you had, you're gonna consolidate it to just the tour pics, and then you're gonna print and assemble it. You're gonna have the drive times on all of them. You're gonna print and assemble it. You're gonna have it in a nice package. If you're touring with them, because it's a local deal, you're gonna take that tour book with you. And you're not gonna have one, you're gonna have one for each person, probably a maximum of 3, because you don't really, people can share. Or if you're not there for this tour I just set up in Columbus, Ohio, right? I package it up, put it in a FedEx, and have my admin ship it out to Columbus for them to take with them. Okay, so that's how you prep it. They're going to show up. You then go back. Remember how I said you just send them a blank calendar invite? So you've checked off, well, I don't have any check boxes, but you checked off setting it up with the leasing agents. You've got everything hammered out with your timelines and everything. So now you have your itinerary. Send calendar invites to all of those leasing agents. Put a calendar block for drive time to make sure you have the correct amount of drive time. It's okay if it's a little off as long as it's mostly right, okay? Now all of those things are on your calendar. Then go to that calendar block that you sent your client as a placeholder and update it with the entire tour itinerary. If you're going to be there, you just have the tour itinerary and the addresses. If you can't be there, like in Columbus, Ohio, it's not a big enough deal for me to fly to. My client's going to self-tour the buildings. You have the leasing agent that they're going to meet in the lobby of the building, and then you have their phone number. Okay, That gives them the opportunity where if they show up and the leasing agent's not there, running a few minutes behind, they can text or call the leasing agent and find out what's going on. Okay. If they can't, you always give them the option to call you. Now you've prepped. Now you're done. They're good to go. They've got their book. They've got the phone numbers. They've got the drive times and the itineraries. Everything's worked out, mapped out. Great. You're good to go. Okay. So how to facilitate a tour. All right. If you are going on the tour, that's great. If you're not going on the tour, you have to coach up your client about this. When you are going on the tour, you want to make sure you're asking all of the right questions, okay? If you have all the answers, it doesn't matter. If you have all the answers, it doesn't matter. You have to ask the right questions. So when you're on the tour, you ask the questions like, what is the landlord going to give in TI allowance? These guys are trying to sell, so they're going to overcommit. When they overcommit, then you use that as leverage against them in the negotiations. So you ask them stuff like that. What are they going to do with the TI allowance? Oh man, these ceiling tiles are horrible. You want to make sure that you're in a position where you're asking questions to keep them on their toes. If you're a broker, you get to ask questions, but don't try to overstep them. Don't try to like big dog them per se, right? This is what they do. This is what they take pride in. So let them show the client. Let them be excited. Respect their role as the expert in this building. And let them guide the client through the building. And you are tagging along. You're part of the client's team right now, right? And you're following along. You're asking questions your client might not have thought about, etc. Okay, so let them shine. Warning, do not, for any reason, walk in there and say, man, I love this building. This is the best building we've seen all day. Don't say stuff like that. I've had clients do that, and it's so brutal because the leasing agent goes, bing, I know that they're going to accept pretty much whatever offer we give them because this is the best building they've seen all day. Don't do that. Okay. So, hopefully, that all makes sense. I'm sure there's going to be questions at some point about it. Feel free to drop it into the comments. Next time I do one of these, I'll make sure I answer them. I'll circle back to the last video and I'll answer the questions. So, if you have questions and this is an old video, just go to the most recent video and drop those in the comments. I'll try to get around to it. Okay, part 5. This is the negotiation side of things. Okay, so a lot of fun. Tours are the funnest part, obviously, because you're getting to see something tangible and you're getting to feel it. LOIs are the most aggressive. This is where all of the tension comes into play. If you're the broker and you're negotiating, right? If you're the client, hopefully there's no tension, but this is where all the negotiation comes in. So what is an LOI? An LOI is a letter of intent. It's not binding. Even if you sign an LOI and the landlord signs an LOI, at the bottom of the LOI, and in almost every state, I think every state, but I'm just going to say almost every state, check your states, it's going to say this is not a binding agreement, right? Because it's not. It's a letter of intent, right? Or this could also be called a proposal. So if it's a proposal, again, it's a proposal. It's not a contract, right? This is saying what the landlord's intending to commit to. Okay, so it's basically a list of terms that they intend to abide by when they draft a lease document. So why don't they just draft a lease document? What's even the point of an LOI? The last lease document I reviewed, which was yesterday, was 107 pages long. Okay, 107 pages. The longest I've ever reviewed is over 140 pages. The reason why I say this is because all 107 of those pages that I had to review was put together by an attorney. An attorney had to draft all of that, and that was hours of his time. And those hours were billed at $600 an hour. The point is, it's a lot of money to put together a lease document. And then when you have, as the business, when you hire your attorney to redline the lease document, it's costing you money. And then they send it back, and the landlord's attorney redlines the document, and it costs them money. And back and forth costs legal money. And a lot of times, those terms that you're negotiating, if you just jump to the lease, are things you definitely could have just taken care of in the LOI. They're things like, what's the rate? They're things like, what's the holdover cost? They're things like, am I allowed to sublease the space? And you're negotiating when you shouldn't be negotiating. In a lease, you're supposed to be reviewing and protecting your contract, right? And an LOI, you're supposed to be negotiating the business points. And this is what your broker's for. Your broker does this for 3-4%, whatever the market fees are, but at no cost to you. So you should abuse this part of the process, and you should really lean into this. Okay, so why an LOI? We just talked a little bit about it, but the reason why you have an LOI is because you want to hammer out the business points. You want to make sure all of that's taken care of. There's a couple of legal points sometimes, like a right of first refusal, but at the same time, it just comes down to almost always a business point, right? So how long should an LOI be? An LOI should be 7 or 8 pages long if it's an office LOI. If it's not an office LOI, even if it is an office LOI, it can be less than 5 pages. It can be 4 pages long. But try not to get into more than 8 pages. If you're doing more than 8 pages, you're starting to go haywire, and really you're starting to talk about stuff that probably doesn't matter. But if it's shorter than 5 pages, I'd venture to say that you're not really tackling all the business points you should be. There's usually like 19 or 20 business points in an LOI, and you want to make sure you're taking care of a lot of that. Okay, so what do you include? I'm not going to get into all of the terms, all of the 19 or 20 or whatever points there are, but things that you should include, for example, you have your right of first refusal. You'll have your expansion option, if there's an expansion option. You'll have your beneficial occupancy, which is when you sign the lease and the commencement date is January 1. Am I allowed to start moving in furniture December 1st? Or do I have to wait till January 1 when my lease and my rent starts, right? They're 3 months rent. They're the tenant improvement allowance, which is what your landlord is going to put up money-wise for you to build out the space. That's highly negotiable. Some landlords won't offer anything, and you have to negotiate it out of them. They're the rate themselves, obviously. And then there's a couple of other points that I'm sure I could think of if I really tried, but I'm just starting to ramble. I'm starting to ramble at this point. So who do you send this to? You don't send it to the landlord. You respect the leasing agency, and you send it to the leasing agent. Even if you're doing this on your own, even if you're a business owner who's DIYing it, you send it to the leasing agent. You don't try to sidestep them. It's a bad look if you do. It's disrespectful. And the landlord's just going to flip it back to the leasing agent and say, why are they sending it to me? And the leasing agent's going to be mad at you. And you could kill the deal that way. Don't do that. Okay. So part 6, which is the final part. My gosh, I can't believe we're getting through all of this. This is fantastic. Part 6 is the lease. So what is a lease? We talked about it. 100 pages long, 60 pages long. Could be shorter than that if it's state promulgated, but most likely it's a pretty long document. Who reviews it? Attorneys review it. I have attorneys ask me to review the business points. As a broker, I am not allowed to redline an LOI. That is my legal. I'm not an attorney, so I'm not giving legal advice, but that's my broker opinion. In my public opinion, is that brokers are not allowed to redline a lease, and you can actually lose your license if you redline a lease. So be careful about that. You can add your thoughts. Make sure you say that it's not legal advice, right? So if you see something that's absolutely ridiculous, for example, there's this deal in Borger, Texas that I just reviewed, and the attorney sent it back to me, and he said, is it typical that if a fire starts in the building, the tenant has to pay for repairs to the whole building? No, right? I've seen hundreds of leases. That's not typical, okay? So you should be able to help, but you are not redlining it. That is not your responsibility. It's a waste of your time, and it's also not legal. So you just be wasting your time to put yourself in a really interesting predicament. So be very careful about that. Attorneys are supposed to review that. Your client can review that, okay? And then the broker role, which I kind of just talked about, but the broker role is just to review the business points and make sure it aligns with the LOI. What I do, once we have an LOI that's agreed to, maybe it's signed, maybe we just in written confirmation agreed to it, where you say, okay, we're ready to move to a lease document. What we do is we send the final LOI. If there's an option A, option B, like a 3 and a 5 year term options on the LOI, you say what option it is. You put in the body of the email, hey, Jeff, attorney, This is the LOI, the final LOI that we agreed to. We agreed to the 5-year option. Also attached is the landlord's lease draft based on this LOI. I'm going to follow up with my commentary around the business points to make sure that they're all accurate. I'm turning it over to you because we need your assistance on the legal side. Okay, so when you send it out, you follow up with that email and you say, Jeff, I abstracted the lease. Here's an abstract. It's a summary of all the business points or all the terms on the lease in a consolidated shorthand version. And I reviewed the business points, and all of them are correct except for this term or this term, which shouldn't be right. The last one that I did just yesterday, the renewal window was 3 months, and we didn't have a renewal window. We just had no less than 9 months out. So I just made a comment on that and told them, hey, just FYI, this is the only thing that I saw that's not consistent with the LOI. And then they review the lease, and they redline it, and they make sure it looks great, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Wow. We just ran through that. Where are we at? 50 minutes. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. We're right on time. I'm actually amazed. Okay, so I don't have another page of information to guide off of. I think I'll just go into a couple of frequently asked questions, maybe 3 of them that I have heard in the past. The first one that I've heard is what's typical for broker fees. Okay, so this is actually super important. It's actually a great thing to know. So a broker gets paid by the landlord. So why would a broker have a fiduciary to their client if they're getting paid, incentivized by the landlord? It's exactly how buy-sell stuff works, right? So if I'm representing, if a residential agent is representing someone to buy a house, right, who pays them? Well, the seller pays them. You could argue that the buyer pays them through the purchase, right, of the property, and so technically both of them get paid. Well, that's the exact same thing that happens in a lease contract. So a landlord is going to get paid by the tenant over a 5, a 7, a 10-year period, right? And when they're paid by the tenant, even though it's delayed gratification, right, it's delayed payments, it's installments monthly over the next 7 years, they're still getting paid. And so part of that fee, part of that money, or maybe just you could think of it as the landlord incentivizing, they have a marketing budget. So what they do is when they bought this building, for example, the people that own this building, it's a big fund, they went to the bank and they said, hey, we want to buy the Berkshire. It's like, okay, cool. How much you want to buy it for? Okay, how much are you going to lease it for? What are you going to do with your marketing fees? And they have to bake in market fees to brokers, right? The reason why they have to bake that in is because typically in the market, people expect a certain amount of fees to get paid. Okay, so good example here. If I'm representing someone to buy a home or to sell a home, right, and I tell them, yeah, you could sell it for $1 million, right? And they say, great. And they say, what's the fee? And I say, oh, there's no fee. It's free to sell the home. And then when it comes time to close, then the brokers are all like, where's our fee? And the seller's like, you told me that there wasn't going to be a fee involved. Now the whole deal implodes. Okay, so when a bank funds a building, they require market fees to be baked in. So when deals happen, when a 20,000 square foot user comes in with a broker and they say, hey, market in Dallas is 4.5% of the total lease obligation, then the landlord doesn't go, what are you talking about? We're not going to pay that. We're going to pay 3%. And the broker says, well, you know what? You're not going to have a tenant. And they take their tenant somewhere else, right? And then the lender gets pissed because they literally expected the buyer of the building, when they bought the building, to bake those in and account for it, and they underwrote the building with those in. Okay, I'm rambling, but the point is they bake those fees in. So typically what happens in Dallas is 4.5% to the procuring broker, which is the occupier services, the helping businesses find a home guy. And it's 2.25%, if I'm remembering correctly, it's 2.25% to the leasing agent who's listing the building. So they market the building, they show the space, they list it. So they get less, right? If the procuring broker doesn't exist and it's just a direct deal, where if we go back to that diagram that I put down where it had the building, and then it had the leasing agent, and then the tenant rep, and then the tenant, and you cross out the tenant rep, the leasing agent gets double the fee. Okay, so no matter what, the fees get paid. The question is who do those fees get paid to? So then the question is, the follow-up question I've gotten about that is, well, does that impact the deal? And my response always is, if I can't save you more than 4.5% on the lease consideration, I would just give you back my fee. I have no problem doing that, right? There's part of the fee, and this is where my opinion is actually pretty strong on this, but I don't let it impact anything. There's part of the fee that is a service fee, right? I do all of this work, all of these 6 steps that I showed you in depth. I do all of this work so that my clients don't have to, because they're running a business, and their job isn't to run the business. It's like if you go and you buy a golf cart, right? Could you have made the golf cart from raw materials? Yeah, you could have made a golf cart from raw materials, right? You could go out and do that and spend every weekend for the next 13 to 20 weeks putting together a golf cart from raw materials. But guess what? Is it worth it, or is it worth it just to pay $10,000 and get the golf cart? Okay, so there's part of it where just doing this as a service is definitely worth the fee, in my opinion, and in my client's opinion. But on the flip side, if we're just talking about the negotiation side and saving money, yeah, if I don't save more than 4.5% for my clients, then you can just keep the fee. It's different for every market. That's another question I get, is what are the fees in different markets? So in New York, it's 5% up to 5 years, and then I think it's a cascading down percentile for the longer the term. So if it's a 10-year deal, the consideration is considerably higher than a 5-year deal. Well, they hedge that by decreasing the amount of money that the broker gets per year after 5 years. And that's really because rents go up so fast, landlords don't actually want to do 10-year deals. They actually want to do shorter deals so that they can keep up with rents and no one locks in for too long of a term. And they try to incentivize their brokers with the same thing. Chicago is I think it's $1.50 per square foot per year. The Oakland market is the same thing. It's like $1.50, maybe $1.75 per square foot. Let me think. What other markets are funky? Phoenix is 5% up to 5 years, and I think it cascades down. Dallas, like I said, is 4.5% throughout. Milwaukee is 3%. That's in a lot of tertiary markets, a lot of smaller markets that aren't like established commercial real estate hubs where they're competitive. They're smaller. They're usually 3 and 3. That's for all office real estate. For retail in Dallas, it's 4% for the procuring side, 2% for the leasing side, and it's 3 and 3, like 3% and 3% for both in a lot of other markets. But in Dallas, it's 4 and 2. So that's kind of just the Q&A for broker fees and understanding that. I'm trying to think of what other things that we could do, but like I said, if you guys have questions, throw it into the comments. I'm happy to answer them. I'll try to answer them in the next video. And for now, hopefully you've got the crash course in less than an hour on how to run your own commercial real estate deal, either as a broker or as a business owner DIYing it. So thank you guys. Appreciate your time. Put your questions in the comments and like and subscribe.